Or drifters. Josiah's hand tightened around the rifle. Either way, they were watching. The words sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the wind. For 2 years they had lived quietly, away from towns and gossip. But now, the past, the lawless kind of past that wandered these mountains, seemed to be stirring again. That night, Josiah sat by the window, cleaning his gun by firelight. Margaret tucked James into bed and whispered, "He'll be safe, won't he?" Josiah's gaze stayed on the shadows outside. "Ain't no safety in the wild, only preparation." The next morning, James found something half buried near the stream, a silver locket engraved with a name, Ruth. Margaret turned it over in her palm. It was warm from the boy's hand, yet when Josiah saw it, his face went cold. "You know who this belongs to?" she asked softly. Josiah's jaw tightened. "No." But his voice told another story. Later, while he chopped wood behind the cabin, Margaret noticed the way his shoulders tensed. He wasn't just uneasy, he was remembering something. Something heavy. When she pressed him about it that night, he only said, "Some ghosts don't stay buried, Margaret. Best let them pass." 3 days later, the ghosts came walking. James spotted them first. 4 riders emerging from the pines, their shapes dark against the morning fog. They rode slow, cautious, like wolves circling prey. Josiah stepped out with his rifle. "Inside," he said quietly. "Lock the door." Margaret obeyed, pulling James close as the hoofbeats drew nearer. She watched through the window as the men dismounted. The leader, a thin man with a black coat and a face cut by old scars, smiled as if greeting an old friend. "Well, I'll be," the man said. "Didn't think the mighty Josiah Reed still lived up here. Thought the war or whiskey had taken you." Josiah didn't answer. His stance didn't move. "You're trespassing, Pike." The name hung heavy in the air. Pike tipped his hat. "Easy, old friend. We came looking for a bit of shelter." "Maybe trade. You still a man of mercy?" "Not for you." The man laughed, but it was a cruel sound. "You got a fine-looking homestead here. And company, too, I hear. Word in Cedar Falls says Josiah Reed went and married a widow." "Brave woman, taking on a man like you." His eyes slid toward the window where Margaret stood frozen. "Pretty, too." Josiah's rifle lifted a fraction. "You say her name, Pike, and I'll put you in the ground." The tension thickened. The other men shifted, hands near their guns. Pike only smirked. "Same Josiah I remember. Hot-headed and dangerous. Tell me, you still carry the blood of my brother on your hands?" Margaret's breath caught. "Pike's brother?" Josiah's silence was answer enough. Pike's grin vanished. "Then I reckon we've got business unfinished." He reached for his gun, but Josiah moved first. The rifle thundered once, echoing through the valley. Pike's hat flew off, and a red mark bloomed along his temple. The man staggered back, dazed but alive. "Next shot won't miss," Josiah said flatly. "You and your men ride out now. Don't look back." For a moment no one moved, then Pike spat blood into the snow. "This ain't over, Reed. You can hide up here all you like, but I'll be back. You took my kin. One day I'll take yours." With that, he swung onto his horse and rode off into the trees, his men following close behind. The sound of hooves faded, but the threat lingered like smoke. When Josiah came back inside, Margaret was waiting. "What did he mean, Josiah? What blood?" Quote. Josiah sat heavily by the fire, his face hard and unreadable. "Long before I found you, I was a different man. Pike's brother. He was part of a gang that burned a settlement. I was deputy then. Tried to stop them. Only one walked away, and it wasn't him." Margaret's voice trembled. "So this is revenge? Men like Pike don't forget. He'll come back when the snow melts." Outside, the wolves began to howl again, their cries cutting through the night. James stirred in his sleep. Margaret reached for Josiah's hand. "Then we'll be ready." He looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "You still trust me after everything?" She nodded. "I trust the man who saved my life and keeps saving it." Josiah turned to the flames, his expression softening. "Then God help anyone who tries to take it from me." The wind moaned outside, whispering across the frozen ridge where shadows moved unseen. The mountains had given them peace once. Now, they were about to test it. Snow melted fast that spring. The mountain streams swelled, carving bright ribbons through the thawing earth. Birds returned to the trees, and the smell of pine and wet soil filled the air. But inside the cabin, peace was gone. Every morning, Josiah checked the traps and the tree line. Every night, he cleaned his rifle and sat by the window, watching. Margaret tried to hide her fear for James's sake, but the boy sensed it. "Mama," he whispered one night, "is the bad man coming back?" Margaret held him close. "Not while Mr. Josiah's here, sweetheart. He'll keep us safe." But even she wasn't sure anymore. On the fourth day, Josiah came back from the ridge with a grim face. "They've been close," he said. "Fresh tracks, smoke near the western pines." Margaret swallowed hard. "What do they want?" "Me," Josiah said quietly. "But they'll take everything I care for if they have to." That night, as the sun bled out behind the mountains, Margaret stood on the porch, watching him sharpen his knife by lantern light. He looked different now, like the wild man she'd first met, the kind of man who could kill without blinking. But beneath that roughness, she saw something else. Fear, not for himself, but for her and their boy. "Josiah," she said softly, "what if we go south, leave the valley before they return?" He shook his head. "Running won't help. They'll track us, only one way to end it." The next morning, he began preparing. He set traps along the ridge, fortified the cabin walls, and dug a shallow pit near the stream. "For cover," he said simply. Margaret worked beside him, her hands raw and trembling, but she didn't complain. She'd survived storms, hunger, and wolves. She would face this too. By the third night, the signs were clear. Horses, 4 of them, moving slow through the timber. Margaret grabbed James and pulled him inside. Josiah loaded his rifle, his face calm as stone. "Stay by the hearth," he said. "If anything happens, you take the boy through the root cellar. Follow the stream south till you hit the ridge trail." "What about you?" she whispered. He met her eyes. "I'll find you. I always do." The first gunshot split the night. Glass shattered. Margaret screamed as a bullet buried itself in the wall behind her. Josiah fired back, the flash lighting the cabin like lightning. "Down!" he barked, shoving the table over for cover. James cried out, clinging to her skirt. Outside, men shouted. Another shot tore through the door. Josiah returned fire, then rolled behind the window frame, reloading fast. "Stay low!" he called, but Margaret had already moved. She grabbed Josiah's old revolver from the shelf and pressed it to her chest. Her hands shook, but her eyes were fierce. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Gunfire echoed through the valley, the wolves howling in answer. Smoke filled the cabin, stinging her eyes. When the firing finally stopped, silence fell heavy as snow. Josiah peered through the cracked door. "3 down," he muttered. "Pike's still out there." Then came the voice, from the trees, calm and cold. "Reed! I told you this wasn't over. Come out and face me, or I'll burn your pretty house to the ground." Margaret's heart stopped. Josiah looked back at her. "Take James. Go to the cellar." Quote, "No," she said, "not without you." His eyes softened for the briefest moment. "You're my heart, Margaret. You keep him safe. That's how you save me." Before she could answer, he was gone. Out into the dark, she clutched James tight and watched through a crack in the door. The moonlight fell on 2 figures in the clearing, Pike and Josiah, facing each other among the whispering pines. "You could have left it alone," Pike said, his voice low. "Could have lived your quiet little life." "Some things don't stay buried," Josiah replied. "You brought this on yourself." Pike laughed, then drew first. The sound of the shot echoed up the ridge, but Josiah was faster. His bullet struck true. Pike fell hard into the snow, his gun still smoking. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Josiah staggered, clutching his side. Blood soaked through his shirt. Margaret ran to him, her bare feet breaking through the snow. "Josiah!" She dropped beside him, pressing her hands to the wound. "Stay with me." He smiled weakly. "You're warm," he whispered. "Keep him warm." His eyes flicked toward James, who was crying silently. "Don't talk like that," she begged. "You're not leaving us." But his strength was fading fast. He reached into his coat and pulled out the silver locket, the one engraved Ruth. He pressed it into her hand. "For him," he said, "for the boy. Remind him that even men made of stone can love." Tears streamed down her face. "Josiah, please!" He touched her cheek, his thumb gentle. "You gave me back my soul." Then his hand fell still. Margaret's cry broke through the night, raw and aching. The wolves answered her, their howls rising like a morning hymn. She stayed there in the snow, holding him until the first light of dawn turned the mountains gold. By morning, Pike's gang was gone, scattered, broken, or buried in shallow graves. The valley was quiet again. Margaret stood beside the stream, the locket heavy in her palm. James held her hand, his small fingers gripping tight. "Mama," he whispered, "where's Mr. Josiah now?" She looked toward the ridge where sunlight touched the pines. "He's home, sweetheart," she said softly. "He's finally home." The wind blew gently through the valley, carrying with it the faint echo of a wolf's cry, strong, proud, and free. And somewhere deep in the heart of the Montana mountains, Josiah Reed's spirit walked on, guarding the family he had died to protect. The snow melted early that year. Streams ran fast and cold, carrying the winter's sorrow down through the valleys. Margaret stood by the grave beneath the pine ridge, her hand resting on the rough wooden cross Josiah had carved years before, long before he ever knew it would mark his own name. She had placed the silver locket at the foot of the cross, the one engraved Ruth. It glimmered in the sunlight, half buried in the melting snow. "I'll take care of him," she whispered. "You gave your word, and I'll keep mine." Behind her, James was stacking firewood, his movements careful and steady, the way Josiah had taught him. He was 7 now, taller, stronger, though his eyes still searched the horizon like his stepfather's had. "Come inside, sweetheart," Margaret called. "The stew's almost done." Quote. He dropped the wood and ran to her, his boots splashing through the mud. As she closed the cabin door, the smell of venison and pine smoke filled the room. Life had returned, quietly, like green shoots through thawing soil. But peace, Margaret knew, was not the same as stillness. The mountains had changed her. The woman who once feared the storm had become someone who could walk through it. Weeks passed. Spring bloomed across the valley. She traded pelts in Cedar Falls again, hauling them down the trail Josiah had cleared years ago. People there spoke softer now when they saw her. Some said she was the bravest woman in the territory. Others said she was touched by the wild. Reverend Morrison found her one afternoon outside the general store. His eyes were kind, but sad. "You've done well, Mrs. Reed. Josiah would be proud." She smiled faintly. "He's still here, Reverend. Every time the wind blows through the trees, I hear him." The Reverend nodded. "The Lord gives, and the mountains keep." Quote. That summer, travelers began to stop by the cabin. Miners, ranch hands, widows with nowhere to go. Word had spread that a woman lived up the ridge, who never turned anyone away. Margaret fed them, patched their wounds, and sent them on with warm food and quiet wisdom. Some called her the widow of the pines. Others said the wolves themselves guarded her home. One evening, as the sun sank behind the peaks, Margaret sat by the fire, sewing patches on James's shirt. He was out by the stream trying to catch fish the way Josiah had shown him. She looked up when she heard footsteps on the porch. A man stood in the doorway. A stranger, tall and lean, with a limp that spoke of long roads. His hat was in his hands, his clothes dusty. "Ma'am," he said softly. "Name's Daniel Harper. Passed through Cedar Falls. Folks said you might give a man a warm meal and a place to rest." Margaret studied him for a long moment. His voice carried no threat, only exhaustion. "You're welcome to sit," she said, motioning toward the fire. He nodded gratefully and stepped inside. When James returned with a string of trout, he eyed the stranger curiously. "You're hurt," the boy said. Daniel smiled faintly. Horse slipped on a rock crossing the pass. "I'll be all right." Margaret served him stew, and for a long time they ate in silence. The fire popped softly. The night outside was calm, the kind of peace that came only after many storms. After supper, Daniel spoke again. "I knew Josiah Reed once," he said quietly. "Long time ago. We fought together in the frontier war. Didn't know he'd passed." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. "He died the way he lived, protecting what mattered." Daniel nodded slowly. "That sounds like him." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, folded paper. "He wrote this once. Told me if anything ever happened to him and I made it through, I was to give it to his family." Margaret's hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was rough, faded by time and sweat. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. Tell Margaret and the boy that no man finds peace without first losing it. Tell them to keep the fire burning. The world's cold enough without it. Josiah Reed." Her tears fell silently onto the page. She folded it carefully and placed it beside the Bible on the mantel. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel stayed a few days, helping mend the roof and repair the traps near the ridge. When he left, the morning was bright and clear. "You've built something good here," he told her. "Josiah would be proud." Margaret smiled, the wind tugging gently at her hair. "We built it together." After he rode off, she turned toward the trees where sunlight filtered through the branches. James was playing near the stream, skipping stones, his laughter echoing like music through the valley. For the first time in a long while, Margaret felt peace settle deep within her. Not the fragile kind that waits for danger to return, but the kind that grows roots, steady and strong. That evening, she sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed gold across the mountains. The wolves began to howl, their voices long and low. James ran to her side, his small hand finding hers. "Mama," he said, "are the wolves talking again?" She smiled. "They're singing, sweetheart." "What are they singing about?" She looked out over the wild land that had taken everything from her and given her even more in return. "They're singing about family, about home."